So we'd like to bring the study session to order. And we are going to have KIPP Charter Application Overview. So.
We do have a presentation to hear. We're waiting on, Sheila has the actual presentation that we're going to be able to put up. Or, do you have it, Monica? Okay. So as soon as Sheila gets down here, we'll go start the presentation. Okay. And we do have from KIPP's Charter School here as well.
Okay. So do you want to do yours first? Wait for Sheila?
I was just here with Sheila to help present for the charter schools.
Okay.
Yep. I think Jamie Ball is going to be going over the UIP presentation.
She's not until 6.
Okay.
All right. Hello, Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent. We have a study session today on the charter application review process. So we're going to get started. The Executive Director, Sheila Burke, will be joining us momentarily, as well as Sean Milner. So what we have for you today in terms of goals for your study session are the following. We want to review the background information. And excuse me, just for, okay, thank you. We want to review the background information in the process to date. We want to present the proposed timeline for the charter authorization process. We want to be able to summarize the charter authorizing process steps. And then we want to solicit feedback and input from the board on some key questions and guiding questions. Let's start with the background. We reviewed this at your last study session. On July 12, 2018, we received an application from KIPP Commerce City Academy. Per your policy, LBD, and the statute that correspond to charter authorizing, district administrators began to implement the charter application review process. As per your policy, and I'm quoting, the board shall make a decision on a complete district charter application by resolution in a regular or special board meeting 90 days after receiving the initial charter application from the charter applicant, or such deadlines as may be mutually agreed upon by the board and the applicant. As we discussed in your last study session, the recommendation from the administration is to approve a 34-day timeline extension to ensure a thorough, fair, and transparent charter review process. So that is an edit here. I'll take this opportunity to just be transparent and let the board know that we are still in discussions with KIPP. They have, and they are here, and they will be here throughout your board meeting, so they can speak for themselves in public comment. We are mutually agreeing on the November 13th board action by this board, and we're still working on the procedures for both your board and the KIPP board. I think there's been a confusing around the 30-day extension versus a 34-day extension. What it should be is a 30-day extension, meaning that your final action will be on November 13th, 2018. Hello. I'd like to turn it over to Sheila Burke to continue with the presentation. Of course, I and Sean will be available to answer any questions and provide any additional information.
Good evening, everybody. I apologize for my tardiness. I was helping a school out on the telephone. I'm going to kind of pick up where my colleagues have left off. So my name is Sheila Burke, and I'm going to be here tonight presenting our charter school application process. Okay. So on here, we're going to start with our charter application review process. So on July 12th, the Adams 14 School District received a charter school application from KIPP. Okay, did you walk through this? Yes, I did. Okay, I apologize. We're going to go on to the next slide. Do you have the clicker?
That is the next slide.
Okay, thank you. As we continue with our charter school application review process, we wanted to review the goals we established for extending our timeline. One of our goals is to ensure compliance with the state and local statute and adherence to national best practice. To complete make sure that we have a complete and fair, transparent, and comprehensive evaluation of the charter applicant to inform the board's decision and build trust between all stakeholders. We also wanted to share that our charter application review process is in compliance with state law, local policy, and national best practice. Earlier, we had mentioned the goals with our timeline. Here you will see the timeline that was mutually agreed to by our charter school applicant. On the 12th of July, you'll notice that KIPP provided us with their application. On 8/29, DAC begins to review the application. On 8/29 tomorrow, our internal application review team, or what we're referring to as ART, begins reviewing the application. On 9/18, our community meeting number 1 and number 2 will begin. On 9/25, our board study session will also begin. This will be a KIPP presentation with questions and answers for the board. On 9/26, the community staff board tour of KIPP. This date is tentative, so we'll make sure that if it should change, that we inform the board as well as our community. Our superintendent and DAC recommendations to the board will be held on 10/9. On 10/11, the community meetings number 3 and 4 will be held, and this will be feedback shared with the board before your vote. On 10/23, a public hearing on the application would be hosted. And then on 11/13, our board will vote on the charter school application.
Excuse me, on August 29th, DAC begins the reviewing the application?
Yes,
That's tomorrow.
that's tomorrow, that's correct.
What time and where and what's going to be covered?
So our meeting will begin at 5:30. Dinner will be served from 5:30 to 6. It will be at Adams City High School in the cafeteria. And
So-
once our board will take action tonight on a superintendent recommendation on their extension for the timeline. Once our board decides to approve it, should you choose to, then our timelines will go public tomorrow morning.
Okay, but at any rate, so tomorrow evening will be the beginning of the review process?
Yes.
And when will the DAC review end?
Our review timeline ends on
October 9th.
October 9th.
That's when the recommendation.
Okay.
Dr. Hyde, members of the board.
Are there a series of meetings between the 8/29 and October 9th?
Dr. Hyde, members of the board, so yes, we can give you the details behind the review process so you see the whole process mapped out. They're, in essence, kind of 3 processes, and we're going to walk you through that in a few more slides so you could kind of see. And maybe I'll just make a note to come back to your question in terms of the individual DAC meetings or the individual application review team meetings, so we can address them at the end.
So as Alex was starting to share with you, there's 3 processes that are happening sort of simultaneously. In the timeline, you'll notice that DAC was mentioned in there, our ART team, which is our application review team, as well as recommendations from the superintendent and from DAC. Here we have a visual to help support that. you'll notice that DAC is going to provide a recommendation to you. Our art review team will provide a recommendation to the superintendent. The superintendent will provide a recommendation to the Board of Education. And then our community input and feedback that we will host here will provide information to our Board of Education for you to make your final decision on the vote that you'll get. So that will happen, those three things simultaneously. Okay.
So,
Go ahead,
Question?
Dr. Heidrich.
Into which of the three circles would our request for a comparative analysis between a local authorized charter and a state authorized charter, into which of those three circles would that analysis fall?
So that'll be part of our board study sessions. From our last board meeting that you provided guidance to our team on topics that you wanted to review. So in a couple more slides, we'll go through, we've outlined those in a progressive timeline so that you can see what board meeting study sessions are coming up. And that way you can prepare your questions with the consultants that we may bring in or experts that we may bring in to answer any and all questions that you have as a board.
And have you contacted those consultants as of this date?
We are in the process of contacting most of our experts and consultants on your behalf so that we can bring those in and have them ready for the next board meeting. So we're hopefully trying to stay ahead of all of the information that you're getting, as well as for our public, so that they can make the best decision for our district.
Does it include CSI?
Yes,
Thank you.
and we'll go through those in a couple more slides. So in our charter school application review process, Adams 14 is conveying a multidisciplinary team to review the charter school application and evaluate the founding team. The group includes district experts in the following areas: finance, curriculum and instruction, English language acquisition, special education, governance and leadership, community engagement, and a parent. The representatives of these groups will also interview the charter school applicant to ask questions that may not have gotten answered as we reviewed the application with the rubric that we've provided from the state of Colorado. This information will be compiled and given to a recommendation to our superintendent, who will then use that information to formulate a recommendation to the Board of Education. Our charter school application review process, and this is one of the other bubbles that we looked at from that slide. DAC is performing an independent parallel review of the application and founding team. DAC will be made up and comprised of, per state statute, 3 parents, 1 community business representative, 1 teacher, 1 school administrator, and 1 parent group. Please note that our members of DAC must reside in our boundaries of Adams 14.
Does that mean, it says 1 parent group member, so 1 person?
It can be 1 person who represents a parent-teacher organization group or a PTO or a PI. Typically, our district doesn't have any PTAs currently because we don't operate under an association. Next, we're going to have our community input as part of our charter application review process. The district is convening 4 community meetings dedicated to engaging a broad base of Adams 14 stakeholders. The goal of these meetings is to inform the community members of the process, give opportunities for the community to interact with the charter applicant, and collect feedback from the community members on behalf of the board. There will also be public comments in a hearing. The process and timeline includes a total of 7 public comment sessions and 1 public hearing that will be provided to the Board of Education to help you make your decision.
And would that be like here or where?
Yes, ma'am. So these are because the board meets twice a month, in the time frame of this process between July or between August and November 13th, you have 7 public comment sessions, opportunities for the public, and 1 public hearing as required per statute.
As we continue with our charter school application review process, there's study sessions that we have outlined per our last meeting and the guidance that you provided to us. So our study sessions, the board has an opportunity to engage in meaningful discussions during the charter application review process. On 9/11 will be our board study session. We're going to look at the opportunities and risks of a charter partnership. On 9/25, KIPP will have a presentation with a question and answer from the board. On 10/9, we'll have recommendations by the superintendent and DAC. On 10/23, if recommendations for approval, the charter contact considerations and updates. And then on 11/3, the board will have a final study session as well as providing their vote on the application. Within those topics is where we're going to outline the information that you provided us during our last meeting, such as those experts coming in, whether it's from CSI or other governing boards, as well as providing a tour of KIPP schools, not only to our board, but to our community as well. So from here, some guiding questions that we need from the board. 1, are there any other study sessions or topics that the board would like to request as it relates to the charter authorizing process that we didn't outline here? And 2, does the board have any additional guidance on the process and timeline for the charter authorizing process that we didn't include here that you would like to see included? No? Okay. So some next steps and upcoming meetings. On September 11th, our board study session will be the opportunities and risks of a charter partnership. On September 18th will be our community meeting. Our applicant will have a presentation and feedback collection from our board. And then on September 25th, another study session with KIPP providing the presentation and the board being able to ask questions and then providing answers. September 26th, we have a tentative date of touring a KIPP school, not only for our Board of Education, for our community, and any Adams 14 staff that would like to participate. So this concludes our presentation for tonight. Again, I apologize for my tardiness. Are there any questions that you have or additional guidance that you would like to provide to us and our team?
Yeah, I do. I have been talking to some community members about this, and some of them have come up to me and told me that KIPP is a profit organization. Can you explain to me the difference between a profit and a nonprofit?
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Rolla. Madam President, members of the board, Ms. Superintendent. So these are all the questions that will come up in a lot of the community meetings. The short answer is there is no for-profit charter school in the state of Colorado. The type of governance structure is dictated by law, and so schools, such as a charter school, are comprised of 501c3, so that's typically the governing structure and how they file with the government to be able to exist. As a 501c, meaning as a nonprofit, they have a governing board made up of their stakeholders, whatever process and procedures they follow to establish their governing board. And then that governing board has the fiduciary duty to approve policy, to approve budgets, just as most other governing boards do. But in the state of Colorado, there's no such thing as a private charter school unless they're a private school. And that's a different concept. Charter schools are a public entity under state law.
Perhaps something that might be helpful for my colleague on the board would be to know whether the Board of Directors of KIPP receive any form of compensation.
Mr. Hyde, Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent, so these are all questions that would be good at this point to be able to bring back to you with information. And in the process of your consideration for this application, you also will have an opportunity to meet the leaders of KIPP. You yourselves will have an opportunity to hear a presentation from them and ask questions directly. And we will also be able to provide and answer any of these questions for you in the short term. In the state of Colorado, just to give you just context on your specific question, Dr. Hyde, in the state of Colorado, members of the boards of 501c3s are not paid, and KIPP would be no different. They would be a nonprofit 501c3. Board members are volunteers, just like usually board members of school boards in the state of Colorado.
But what about their teachers and their staff?
In terms of compensation, Madam President? Got it. And so we're happy to bring you that information back to you in future meetings, and also make that as a note that you as a board will be interested in understanding their governance structure, whether they're for profit or not for profit. You want to, kind of information about just compensation structures, teachers, administrators, contracts, et cetera. Also in terms of whether directors of the board are paid or not paid, volunteers, non-volunteers. Any other questions that you'd like us to consider as we bring forth presentations to you, whether it's from KIPP or other organizations?
I would like some literature on how they deal with special needs kids. And that could be from borderline SPED to severely handicapped children, and paperwork on, do they turn away the kids or do they take them, and then after a certain amount of time, because they're a lot of work, do they send them back to their home school? How are they qualified to handle special ed, or however you want to label them, special needs kids? Because we have a few of them. And I don't want them, what's the word I'm looking for? Not accepted into that school because of their needs.
That's great.
I'd like to follow up on Madam Chairman's comment, because I think our community has, and it's not just our community, I think nationally there is an enormously strong belief that charter schools are sucking money out of the coffers, the public coffers. And if it were strictly untrue, I think the rumor would die. The fact that it's persistent and pernicious and doesn't go away suggests that there's some truth to the allegation. And so over the coming weeks and months, I would like to have the district be as diligent as it can be to try to get to the bottom of that allegation, that charter schools siphon off money from the public coffers, and that money goes into individuals or corporate pockets. I think that is at the heart of the chairman's comment and at the heart of Mr. Rolla's comment. I think we have all heard that from members of the community for years, that is probably one of the biggest issues. And then, as the chairwoman mentioned, that goes hand in hand with that, the cooling out of students who have above average costs involved in their education. And those two things, I think, are probably, I can't think of two bigger public obstacles that I think we should try our best to get to the bottom of. Thank you.
Dr. Hyde, Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent. So these are all great questions, and these are the type of guidance that we're seeking from you today. So this is a great dialogue because we're taking note, and I think when we come back to you in future study sessions, we can bring you the literature, we can bring you some of the answers. We can also let our, the applicant and others who would be presenting to you to make sure they're prepared with some of this information when they come and present. I'm just thinking about your study session, the study sessions that are coming up, like September 11th. For example, right now we have it under a broad umbrella of what are the opportunities and risks around charter partnerships. We could potentially, think about bringing in other folks too, who can also address and give you a kind of a charter school 101 presentation about, how they were established in law in Colorado, how do they exist today, what's the landscape look like, what's the difference between being a school district that authorizes charters versus a school district that doesn't, what are the pros and cons to those schools of thought, hearing from the state authorizer in terms of what lessons learned they've had and what they consider when school districts reject a charter school potentially, and addressing some of the other pieces around special education, around students that are admitted or not admitted, really getting into some of the key questions that we know we're going to get in the community, and so trying to get ahead of it just makes more sense. That's what we ought to be doing as a school system, getting information, getting facts, getting key questions, and getting those answered as soon as possible so that everyone has all the information they need to have a good, lively discussion and debate from now until November 13th.
And the reason I don't know if you would call me an avid person on the special needs is because this is the school district they sent all the special needs kids to. They were first at DuPont, and the severity at that time was highly retarded to seizures but they were just mild cases. But then when the major schools shut down, I don't know if you remember, Dave, Rivendell, something like that.
Yeah.
They stopped taking kids and they had to come back to the schools. Well, we were the major school, and that opened up. And the reason I know the history, because I was the health clerk at Hanson, we handled all the severely handicapped special needs kids at Hanson. And that came from hydrocephalic to tube feeding to trachs, suctioning, because I had to do it. That's why I know. I want to know if these kids that are special needs come to them, they cannot reject them. They have to be qualified because it takes a lot of work to deal with those type of children. And that's what we had here. We had severely seizures, grand mal. We had kids that were microcephalic. We had just any range. And we could not turn those kids away. As a health clerk, I had to be trained under special training how to handle those children whenever they needed. So that's why I'm wondering, because we took them, we were highly qualified and trained under doctors, under all that. So I want to make sure that they cannot turn any child that has special needs or whatever they are, whatever their IEP is, away.
That's great.
So
So Madam President, members of the board, Ms. Superintendent, so we're taking notes to make sure that we are addressing these questions. Just in thinking about the areas you touched on, Madam President, special education, not turning away students. I think and then contractually, because you're a charter authorizer, should you proceed with a partnership with a charter school, you have your contract as a means to put to put accountability, to put oversight into the charter school. So that's another topic that we can bring forth to you as a study session. Should you want to proceed with a charter, approving of a charter application, what does that look like? What is that partnership? What are the best lessons learned from other school districts? How do you ensure that you have the right accountability, the right oversight to ensure that every single school under your oversight is supporting and serving every single student? And just to clarify, state law requires that every school serve students. And so sometimes schools that can't provide some services oftentimes will contract those services with the school district to be able to provide those services. It could be special ed, it could be other services like transportation. We'll bring forth in a study session that conversation so you see what other districts do when they are.
See, and we had that under CLA, so
Yep.
I know about that.
Okay.
But I was more concerned about the special needs,
Yeah,
And also, biliteracy.
by literacy,
right.
yeah,
I would definitely, I want to see all that too.
yes.
Absolutely. And you have an opportunity to see their application. You have an opportunity to ask these questions directly to the applicant. Their application becomes the basis of the contract, right? So it's their commitment to you in terms of what they can deliver. And then you ultimately will develop a contract that will govern the relationship between that charter school.
And that's how we handled CLA.
And that's how you hold them accountable.
Are there additional questions or additional guidance that you have for us and our team? Before we close out, I do want to introduce our Board of Education to Mr. Chris DeWitt. He is here as a consultant that we brought in as an expert to help us temporarily with our application review process to ensure that we're in compliance with both federal, state, and local laws. So I have him here
Was
tonight.
he in DAC?
I'm sorry?
Was he at DAC?
He was, yes,
Okay.
yep. We introduced him to DAC as well, so I wanted you to also know that he's here with us temporarily to help us make sure that we're in compliance in all areas, as this is not my area of expertise. And so we want to make sure that we're providing you and our systems with all the information that we need.
I'm sorry, again, the next DAC meeting is
Tomorrow,
tomorrow. And just wanted to say, last week, me and Madam Chair was at the DAC meeting, and I'm surprised there's not a lot more community members there. So I'm not sure how y'all getting the information out to the community, because it seemed like it should be more community members present than what it is. So how is that communication getting to about this KIPP? President?
There was probably what, maybe 10, 15 parents?
Maybe.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Thomas, Madam President, school board members, and Mr. Superintendent. That is something that I have made note of. In terms of DAC and how we've treated DAC, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in Adams 14 around community engagement. I know you all recognize that DAC is one of those branches where we really need to step it up and strengthen how we recruit, the type of structures that we put on DAC, so that they do their function, which is critical to the democratic process of school board decision-making. And so we are looking at how do we best promote it, how do we best recruit for it, and put some of those structures in place, because there are not many structures in place. DAC should be a group of roughly about 20 to 14 members. They should be people who have a deep connection to the boundary that you serve. They should be representative of the different stakeholders throughout your community. It should be heavily weighted to parents, as the law already forces you to do. And we should have employees, and we should have a few representatives from the community. It is not a community meeting, and I know that that's been an approach with Adams 14. It is not a superintendent forum. These individuals, these 12 to 14 individuals, have a legal obligation, a fiduciary duty to fulfill a specific role under the law to make sure that this school district works in the way that it should work. And so I look forward to working individually with all of you as well to see your individual ideas. We definitely need to do better at recruitment. We definitely need to put structures and systems in place, and we definitely need to make sure that we are providing them the space and the opportunity to play their role within the decision-making process of this school district.
When we used to have, when DAC first started, we did have quite a few parents, right? And they kept coming and they kept coming, but I think what was happening where the parents were talking, but I don't know if they were getting the answers to the topics that they wanted discussed, you know, and I think from my many years in the school districts, a lot of times you start getting the staff running the meeting, and I believe in something like that, the parents should be running the meeting and the staff should sit back and listen, but that's me.
I got a question. Staff was at Kearney, KIPP, and also yesterday, and they was at DuPont today. Did anybody mention DAC? Did anybody pass out any literature towards DAC meeting? Did anybody mention DAC at those ceremonies yesterday at Kearney, KIPP, also up in DuPont today?
So, Mr. Thomas, the answer is no. The audience were students, and the audience were staff members.
Yeah.
There were a few parents and community
parents.
community leaders, but the audience itself was not parents.
And
There was a few.
what was the purpose of us buying that app on the phone for parents?
Fly, was it Fly?
Yeah.
Fly rep.
What was the purpose of that?
Sure.
Was that not to let parents know that we was having DAC? Don't that go out?
Sure.
Wasn't that the purpose of the app, letting parents know that we was having? Don't kids go home and flyers can go home with kids?
Sure.
I mean, I'm trying to be nice right now and say, don't tell me the meeting was about kids. The ceremony was about kids. The ceremony was about staff, parents, and students. And we talking about DAC getting the information to the parents. We've spent this money on this flyer, this app to get it out, and we're not taking advantage of the situation. That's what I'm asking, Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Madam President, school board members, and Mr. Superintendent. So I don't need to tell you the gaps we have within our community at 14. It's decades of neglect to community engagement and to communications, and this is the result. You have a disenfranchised community. I don't need to tell you this, right? You know this, and it's not going to be solved by one app, or it's not going to be solved by one strategy, but it's going to be solved by a comprehensive, a true investment from this board and this administration on really authentic, genuine community engagement. We have very little capacity, if at all, to be able to do this work the right way. And so I look forward to working with the administration, look forward to working with individual board members to be able to solve this. It's going to take your leadership from the dais to be able to improve this. Flyer app is a solution that's been added to the school district. We have a huge digital divide in our community. It should be not a surprise to you all, right? There's a huge digital divide. It's the intake of Flyer app. We're still looking at it to make sure that schools are utilizing in the best way. To answer your basic question, we have used Flyer app. The question is, that's not going to solve the problem that you want solved. We really have to hire the right people to be able to get out in the community, recruiting families, recruiting parents. DAC is where it's at because we haven't had opportunities for the public to engage the school district, and so we've used DAC as a community forum. And when you have a lack of engagement out there, people will find some of these forums, and DAC has been one, but it's not serving the legal purpose, or at least as of today, it hasn't served that structure just because we haven't done it well. So I look forward to working with all of you. It's going to take leadership from the dais to make sure that we do community engagement and communications authentically, genuinely, and that we're proactive. And it's going to take investment to be able to do that. We're not going to solve it with one app.
Adding to Mr. Thomas there, I don't know how many members we'll have there tomorrow. I know I'll be there. Some of us will be there tomorrow. But if it doesn't turn out, I hope that we get a table for the spaghetti dinner with the firemen, that we have a table set up for DAC to recruit community members, because there's over
What's tomorrow?
the last couple years, my understanding, talking to the fire chief, is there's been over 2,300 people attend the spaghetti dinner. If we can just get 1/8 of those people to come, we'll be in good shape. So let's just take advantage of that situation. I know we didn't get a chance to take advantage of the outreach, the Commerce City outreach, because I guess we weren't invited to set up tables there, but every chance we get something to set up a table and advertise and make sure that when they have back-to-school nights that they'll be having here shortly for the schools, that we have somebody. And if you need some of us to go out there, I'm sure some of us would be glad to go out there and talk to parents. But you're right, this has been, and I've been here since 1959, and we've had problems. Only certain individuals get involved, and they think they run it all, but I think we got to get more and more people involved. And as Connie mentioned, when Mr. Sanchez was here and Dr. Steele, there were some of the DAC meetings, there were over 200 people that were attending when we were at the high school. And then for some reason, they moved it here, and then we lose the parents. I think people are just scared to come to the ESS building, and so I'm glad that we're back at the high school, and maybe we can pick it up again.
And I think it's just, and I say you're new here, but I think it's just, we had their trust and we lost it, you know, and that's gonna take some time, if ever it will be back. You guys know that from even yourself, your adult life. If you had the trust of somebody and they broke that trust, to try to get it back, it's like painstaking. So I do believe we can get it back, and we're gonna have to be consistent. You know, we can't do it this week and then next week we forget about it. You know, being around kids all my life and having my own kids, they progress much faster if you are consistent in what you do. Because I don't feel good today, I can't do it. Whether you feel good or not, you do it. Because kids learn by consistency, repetition. You know, and I believe parents, as people, that's what we do. So, anyway,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Rowley, if I may just address kind of your point on the DAC, you know, I really look forward to individual input from board members about your own vision for DAC, right? Under law, DAC needs to be a pseudo governing structure under the umbrella of the school board. Whether you as a school district want to create DAC as a community meeting forum, that's for the school district to decide, although you have to address their legal obligations, and it's going to be hard to get a governing body of 200 people to actually go through a process. They're required to review your policies. They're required to give you recommendations on budgets. They're required to give you recommendations on applications, and they have to go through a process of literally governing and building consensus, whether it's majority rule or consensus or other models. And so it's hard when you have 200 people, because that becomes a community forum or a community meeting. I suspect in a lot of communities where we have this is because there's not many other forums to be able to get all that information, that engagement. If we do it well and we have community engagement, community meetings, regional engagement throughout the city, people feel connected, people feel like they're gonna have a place at the table, not just on the menu, then people in DAC will probably be smaller and will be a lot more functional. And so I look forward to getting some of that individual input from each individual board member.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have for you this evening, so we'll make sure that we compile our notes. We'll send them to Mrs. Avina and to Dr. Abrego so that you guys have them, and then we'll get prepared for our next board meeting. Please make sure that you have any questions for our next presentations on our next board meeting, and we'll make sure that we forward you the topics so that you can compile those as a board.
Thank you. Okay, I believe our next study session is the Unified Improvement Plan process and introduce the 2018-2019 progress monitoring. And that is Jamie Ball.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board, Superintendent Abrego. I have previously sent out this timeline, but I want to give you another copy so you can reference it. Yeah.
Thank you.
an attempt to have better data cycles, I wanted to put together the full year plan so that you are aware of what you can expect of us and what we expect of our school leaders. If you look in the July-August category, it says create progress monitoring tool for short action data cycles. I was able to create and provided for you the progress monitoring tools that will be used for the district as well as the secondary schools and the elementary schools. I met last Thursday at our district leadership meeting in the afternoon, and all of the principals and myself did a study session so that they were introduced to their progress monitoring tool. We went through all of the student data that they now have access to, and they started work on building their specific progress monitoring tools with their data to help drive their improvement strategies. If you look in September, I have a couple talking points for them, and that's update their target setting. And that will be based off of the information that's in the progress monitoring tool. Those are set targets across the district. They are standardized scores for our student assessment data.
So every school,
Every single school.
elementary will have the same,
Every single school in elementary has the exact same progress monitoring tool that is connected to the district tool so that we can make sure that we are all talking the same data. We're tracking it. We all have the same goals, and we're all moving in the same unified direction. Our middle schools, they both have their own tracking tool that is connected to the district. And then Adams City High School and Lester Arnold both have one as well. Lester Arnold's is slightly different based on theirs being an alternative education campus. Their frameworks score them a little bit different than our comprehensive high school. And so we have additional measures for Lester Arnold. They track STAR data as one of their academic measures, which our Adams City High School does not. Another thing that Lester Arnold has that is different is in their post-secondary and workforce readiness category, they have course completion as a way that they get measured, as well as just completion. So that could be GED completions. So students who aren't graduating within the 4 years but complete high school in another manner. So it might be that they complete it 5 or 6 years, or they end up with a GED. And so they have a couple different measures that we track. In October, we will have what's called a, if you look at the October, it says week of October 19th through the 23rd. Each school will be meeting with myself and my team. And then we have the director, Matt Schwartz, and coach, BJ Jeffers, who will be meeting with their specific schools that they support. And we will be taking a look and reviewing each school data to see if we are on track or if we need to make adjustments to what's going on in each school. And so that will happen across the district the week of October 19th through 23rd. As a district, if you look at the November 12th, 13th date, and I'll ask you what you would prefer, if you would like to do this in a study session or for me to report out at a board meeting. I would like to present our quarterly data for you to be able to review. And so if you would like to do what we did last year, where you were able to walk around and look at the data and ask questions and, take some time to reflect upon it, we could do that during a study session in November.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm looking at this sheet here.
Yes.
I did some writing and took some notes. And I'm looking at the 2018 target is 722.3.
Yes.
They don't have no page numbers
So
on them.
I'm looking at this one, but that looks like a different one. Is that-
So that would be our annual targets.
The progress monitoring tool,
Yeah,
I think it's on the back of this.
The back
I
of the
got it
first
up
page.
there. I think I got it. Okay. I'm looking at the 2018 target, 722.3.
Okay.
And I'm looking at 2019 target 739.5.
Correct.
If I did my math kind of almost correct, that's only an increase of less than 1%.
The CMAS assessment is graded on a scale of 600 to 850. And these targets that you're looking at are the targets that are set within CDE state performance frameworks. And so the 722.3 is the approaching target. And they haven't given us the specific targets for next year, but they have stated that they will be more aggressive in what the targets for approaching and meets will be for next year.
So these aren't your targets,
They are set in the
They're
CDE's school performance frameworks. Yep.
and the targets are the same for,
For all students who take CMAS, the range of the scores that you can
so
earn
it's a
are,
state standard. It's not an
Exactly.
Adam 14
Nope.
standard.
those are not based on Adams 14 targets, those are state targets. If we want to move our students to where they need to be, those are the targets that we must reach for academic
So-
achievement.
Go ahead, Doctor.
Okay, so not knowing where our students stand, this doesn't tell us much, does it? It's just a number,
No,
it's just a number.
no.
All I've given you is the blank template for right now.
But we do
Um,
know, we
we
do
are
know
working
our-
on those.
We do know where our students stand because we just got the test, the framework back today.
But they're
So-
not on here.
No.
Right, correct. I submitted this to you before the frameworks were released, so that's why the data is not in there. I don't know if you want to plug in my computer. We can look at what they look like now.
Because some schools is screwed because some schools is up, like ALSUP can bring up other schools. So that's why we saying that 1% from the 72 to the 385, and if I'm not mistaken, is that why you saying that it's all, you trying to do district-wide? But we only doing 1%, because you're only taking up 1%.
So we've spent some time now that we have our frameworks to fill in some of our specific data. If we look up here, this is just our third grade CMAS literacy that you can see on the screen. It should correlate to what you're looking at in front of you. You'll see the 2018 target for our all students in grade 3 was 722.3. Our result was 710.2, which is in the does not meet category for academic achievement. We are setting our target higher because we have to be more aggressive. As the state has stated that the scores will rise, we don't know what the expectations will be next year besides the fact that they have said they're going to be more aggressive. So to take the approach of
But this
being
is-
more aggressive, we have set these targets.
But this is literacy.
Yes.
So, but this ain't telling us as a board how many third graders throughout the district can read at third grade level. This is only giving us a percentage of how many. It could be 100 students and only 73 students can read at a third grade level, 74, and 26 cannot read at a third grade level.
Right, this
So we
data
are
doesn't-
still behind.
Right.
Right.
So we still is not helping those 26 students read at a third grade level.
So when we look at our frameworks, we don't actually get scored by CDE on the number of students who meet or exceed. We don't, that's not one of the measures. The measures is how we do as a district on the scale score. I mean, the average scale score of our students. Our average scale score is 710.2 in the third grade. And so we've set our targets based on how we get scored on our school performance framework, so that we're in a line with how we get scored. So we look at our whole student population. Yes, we did increase the students who were on the meets and exceeds this year, but it wasn't enough to drive up the whole mean scale score.
So basically, you telling, I'm listening to you say, if we're already at 710, all you need is 12.1.
Correct. correct.
And basically, that's only a couple of students, and you're not telling us all students in the 3rd grade.
All students would have to increase an average of 12 points to move that mean scale score up.
So how many 2nd graders coming to the 3rd grade is not giving us the total? We're getting percentages, but we're not getting numbers to go in all students in the 3rd grade, all English learners. We're not getting the numbers.
Like if there was 507 students, is that what you're?
That's what I'm saying. It's not giving you direct. It's not saying, it's not saying in October the 19th and 13th, how many students is meeting
Or
a certain
exceeding.
percentage in October. You said, y'all giving us a percentage saying, oh, a certain amount, but it's not giving us quarterly.
Okay, so I think there's a little bit of confusion. One, this is our annual target. We only look at this once a year because it comes out on our CMAS data. If we go to the next tab, Monica, it's called Interim Measures. And this is where we're going to look specifically at the numbers. And this is going to be, we're in the middle of our testing window right now, so we will be done Friday. And so by Monday, we should have our beginning data that will tell us, I think, what you're requesting, how many students are at or above the grade level, so that we can start targeting how to decrease the number of students who are behind. And that's where we would track this, and the data that we share with you in our data walkthroughs quarterly will be the interim measures, because that's how we tell whether we are on track or off track, because we get to do this frequently throughout the year. Unfortunately, for the school performance framework, it's a one-shot deal. It's our CMAS assessment that happens in April. And then it takes us until August to get the data.
The data.
Right, but
But if you would like the specific number of students, we can absolutely add that in here.
because what I'm saying is, we are moving growth. I'm talking about achievement. What are we doing? Growth is
different.
is good. But we talking about what are we doing as far as the kids accomplishing the reading?
At grade
It's
level.
at grade level. Those are
Are
two
two
different.
very separate
It's
things.
two separate things.
Yes.
So that's, if we do, so we not getting, because you combine the academic and growth, we need two separate things. You giving us academic,
Back to the previous tab.
And I think that's one of the things
Scroll down
we directed Dr.
To the next
J,
blue category.
about the actual number.
You might just have to go down with the arrow. My computer sometimes doesn't let me scroll. So in the next category, you'll see the CMAS, and I've made a few adjustments to what you're looking at. You will see the actual growth by grade. So in 4th grade, the target was 50. Our actual results for 4th grade were 44. And then when we look at our 5th grade, our results were 54. So our 5th grade students, their overall growth met the state expectation. So we know that we need to take a look at what's going on in the 4th grade specifically, because we're struggling there. When we average those two grades out, you'll notice that our English learners, free and reduced lunch, and our minority are sitting at the cusp at 49. So because our 4th graders didn't perform and grow at the level that they needed to, they brought that average down, and so we missed meeting state expectations by 1.
I saw that on Chuck, the CDE thing.
Yeah, so if you look at our overall district performance framework, there are so many areas in growth that we missed moving up a category by 1 that it's hard to swallow. Our elementary growth by 1, our high school growth in many categories by 1. I believe there was a couple middle school categories that we missed by 1. And so we need to look specifically at the grade levels and which population of students we need to focus more energy on. And so that's what this allows us to look at.
Just maybe I can help you. And then, so we know we have to be over 50. And you said we're gonna be testing the kids this week, so
Yes.
that will be our preliminary, so we know
Mhm.
exactly where we're at.
That's our baseline.
And then, once we get our baseline, then every quarter.
Every
like
quarter.
every 9 weeks, we have to track it again
Mhm.
to
see
make
if
sure
they're-
that we're right on.
And that's where you'll be able to see the specific number of students that are meeting or exceeding, and it will break it down in our STAR assessment. It breaks it down by students who exceed, meets, approach, and does not meet, those same 4 categories. And we'll have the specific totals of students, I think, which is what you're wanting to have, so we can look at both achievement, and then we can also start looking at growth separate. And so that's what this progress monitoring tool allows us to do for academic measures. But it also, we track culture and climate. I know that we need to be looking closely at our TLCC survey, our teacher survey, our parent engagement satisfaction survey that we just received, our student surveys, so that we can take action on that based on what each school is receiving as well as the district. So we have culture and climate.
Ms. Ball, further into the report, there's a section on post-secondary and workforce readiness monitoring. And again, it looks like, they have results, 2018 results, scale score, and then 2019 target scale score.
So that would be for our SAT.
But now, is that, again, set by the state?
It is.
So, that to me, it's an exactly a 10% increase from the score to the target for next year.
Absolutely.
And so that's highly suspect in terms of being nothing other than a political decision.
They,
do you have any
from my
information
understanding, they set the targets for the meeting category on the 50th percentile. It's based on percentiles, not political. They take all of the data within the state, they find the 15th percentile, the 50th percentile, the 65th percentile, I believe is how
Yes,
it's
but
broken down.
the difference between the results in 18 and the target for 19 is exactly 10% increase.
I think that's by
That's
just
political.
chance. No,
Oh, by
because it's
chance?
by chance, because I have taken, last year's was approaching, it was our target, this year it's meets.
But
The
this is
numbers
statewide-
haven't changed.
This is statewide, you
Yeah,
said?
the numbers haven't changed over the past couple of years,
Really?
correct.
Okay.
So
Weird.
it's not political, and it's based on a percentile rank.
Okay.
So,
And it might be that we just need to look at the school performance framework and maybe have a little study session on where do the numbers come from and how do we get our points, so that might make a little bit more sense to you.
no, I understand the point. This is Dr. Hyde's first year. I understand. This is my third. But my question is, why we don't go to the 65% percentile and always looking at the 50%? It seemed like to me, we just trying to hit the bare minimum instead of looking for the top. If the 65 percentile is 3/4 of the class, if it's 100, we talking about 75 students. So why are we trying to look at 50% and not looking at the 65%?
We can set it at that if you would like me.
The board can set it
Absolutely.
at that. The Board of Education.
Absolutely.
can
So
set
if
it-
you'd like to make that adjustment, I can absolutely make that adjustment within the
Matter-
tracker.
Matter of fact, Madam Chair, can we have a study session? Because it seemed like nobody came to us to set the goals and the parameters of what we want the district numbers to be and the goals to be. It seemed like it was set and nobody came to us. I think we should have a study session to say, this should be where the district kids should be 75%, and this should be this and this. Because if one school, if Alsop is hitting 65 percentile higher, how come the other preschools cannot hit, the other elementary schools cannot hit that 65 percentile or higher? I think it should, instead of saying the state just wants you at 50, that's just bare minimum of just saying, oh, you out of turnaround, thank you. That's not hitting goals to me personally, saying 65% or higher should be our goals.
I know, when we were yesterday,
Yeah, can
I think it was, when we were going through the green schools, even though Dr. J was saying, even though we hit green, we are going to yet strive for higher. We cannot stop.
may I make
I
a
mean,
comment?
you could say that, but I don't see it in the, Ms. Ball's.
I already, just for this year, if you will, I took, from our targets last year, we're all approaching. And I made them all meets this year, so I have set the targets at a much higher rate at what they were last year, much more aggressive. But if you would like us to go all the way to exceeds, we can set that target. We've never yet reached the meets category before, and so,
That's the problem. They setting the bar too low. Meets exceeding, everything should be high. Why not? What's the problem? Everybody in this district should have expectations that we can do things at a much higher level than we expected to.
duly noted. I will, and do you want to have a study session where you get to set the targets, or do you want me to go ahead and set them as exceeds based on what is in the frameworks?
Dr. J?
And I just want to make a comment because, and help me out if I'm saying the wrong thing, but 50% growth would mean 1 year?
Correct.
Okay, and Mr. Thomas, when we did go to the schools, we did explain that, 50% is 1 year's growth, but I did let them know that our board is going to set higher expectations, that we need to move beyond that 50%. So I think it would be good to have that study session and set a realistic goal, but probably a little bit more
Attainable,
aggressive for all our schools, because that would help us as far
Right,
as,
and to just make sure that we're clear about achievement goals versus growth
Right.
goals.
Jamie,
That would be great.
we're gonna have a retreat on the 12th, 13th, and 14th. We could put you in on that,
Absolutely.
uh,
That'd
to
be great.
discuss it.
That works for me.
Okay, and I think we're gonna be here, Monica? Oh, no, at the,
It hasn't
La
been,
Casa.
it hasn't been confirmed yet.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
she'll let us
absolutely.
know.
But, I'm sorry, you can keep going.
Let's see, I think we were in January, we'll have another study cycle of data. And then again in March, and then wrap it up in May. So you'll have 4 quarters worth of data walkthroughs where we can look at the district data. And I would really like your recommendations as to whether or not you want that in a study session in the same format, or if you have other suggestions of how you would like that presented that's the most meaningful to you.
It seems like if we did it like now, we could set that goal now.
'Cause-
Okay.
To strive further.
Because if the teachers and staff just took the test in April, correct?
Correct.
And they getting the test back now,
Now,
correct? And they finna take a test again.
we take a much shorter version.
our own.
It depends on the grade level, but it can take anywhere between 30 minutes to like 45 minutes. Some of the elementaries, in K3, it's a 5-minute screener.
Okay.
It gives us indicators. So it's nothing to the extent of what they take in April.
But what I'm trying to get at is, if you got the data for say a teacher at one of the elementary schools, 4th grade, that was not so pleasant, and they taking a sub-test in a couple of days, and that's not pleasant. I mean,
The assessments are, they serve different purposes. And the ones that they're taking now and that they'll take frequently throughout the year is really more of a screener to give us a snapshot of where their specific skill deficits are, so that teachers have information of where are the gaps for this particular kid, and then they can start the intervention process on students. And so it drives their instruction and in the intervention side of it. Whereas the state assessment is really, do you meet or exceed grade level?
But that student might have been down here, past the 50 percentile, and gone to the next grade level. So now you got a teacher that's in the 5th grade, might have 10 students that did not qualify to be in the 5th grade.
Right.
That now she has to double
Fill in
back
gaps, yep.
to help raise that kid up. So that's what I'm trying to say.
So that's what the assessment that they're taking right now will tell the teacher. Will tell them exactly how far behind are they. So if they're not doing well in a specific standard, it will tell them, you know, if I'm a 5th grade student, it may say in this specific standard, I'm performing at a 3rd grade level. And so the teacher can then align the instruction to help fill in the gaps of the 3rd and the 4th so that they can attain grade level proficiency at the 5th grade.
Jamie, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Jamie, we're trying to figure out 50% growth is 1 year.
Uh-huh.
Is there a way you can help us determine, like, we don't want 1 year's growth because they're going to stay where they're at?
We have
so
to have 65 or higher with
Okay.
growth
And that's
to
what I was gonna
start
ask.
closing academic gaps.
If you could help the board by letting us
Yep.
know, what is 1 1/2 years growth? What are we looking at?
I would have to reach out to CDE to find if there is a direct
Yeah.
number for 1.5, but I know that if we want to start closing academic gaps, it
That would
has
be
to
good
be
to have that, a
65 or
number like
higher.
that.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to, I'm all for having our kids do as well as they can and setting the bar as high as is reasonable. But I think it's a very difficult task to set realistic expectations. And the reason I think it's difficult to do that is because we don't know very much about what the contributing factors are that promote a child's achievement. And so I don't think we can just say we're going to say our goal is to meet the 65th percentile or to increase by 20% without knowing whether it was a pedagogical problem that held the child back or the class back, whether there was a behavioral problem throughout the classroom, whether the kids were absent a lot, or whether the teachers were absent a lot, and so forth. So I think it's a extremely, without a theory to guide your goal setting, it's just grabbing a number.
It's difficult. I think many of the things that you just brought up there are what we track in our climate and culture. So each school does track behavior, discipline, to see if there is something out of whack going on in their school, because if they're getting really high rates of referrals, out-of-school suspensions, in-school suspensions, absolutely that's a contributing factor. And that would be something that they would need to focus on in their improvement planning, is that information. If we're seeing in our attendance tracking.
And that's where that testing lets the teacher know.
Right. Well, the
Oh.
testing, but then just our general
Screening.
culture and climate data that we're collecting. I mean, it's behavior, it's classroom observations of specific things we're looking
Exactly.
for that are pedagogical related. It's attendance, it's parent engagement, all of those things that contribute to a whole child being successful. And so if we are tracking that closely, especially at schools, we can tell whether or not something is getting in the way that we need to address. And so that's why we track other measures besides just academics.
Right, and that leads directly to classroom by classroom, or
Correct.
school by school.
So in our class
goals,
observations.
rather than having a district-wide goal.
Yep, in our class observations, you will notice that we are doing this online this year, and so that we can get specific percentages. We know which school it's coming from, what grade level it's coming from, what teacher it's coming from, so that we can help support the schools. So if we are seeing that in one particular classroom, continuously the same indicators are showing up, we know that we need to reach out and support that individual teacher in a more aggressive way. Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, I will try to prepare to come and meet with you at your retreat in September.
And I just want to make the comment, I agree with Mr. Thomas, because if we set that bar high, 65, I'm just going to say it as a number, and we were to fall 5% short.
No, we're not falling short. I don't look short.
No, but I'm saying
Our
we
goals-
would still make the meets.
We would get into
Whereas
the meets
If
category.
we shoot at for 50 and they don't get to 50, then we're down and we're not performing. So I'm all for what he said, setting the bar
And
higher.
I agree with you, Dr. Brago and Mr. Thomas. I try to provide positive feedback as much as possible to our administrators and our staff. Some of the comments that come up, if a school is improving for 3 consecutive years in growth, but the growth is still in the does not meets category, it's still not acceptable.
Exactly.
And we need to recognize that and call it as it is. And so those are difficult conversations that I have to have with some of our administrators, because they're always looking for that positive to, pat the backs of the hard work that their staff is doing. But if we're not getting above 50 and into that 65 or higher category, we are not going to meet these academic goals that we are setting. So right now, if we get to the 50th in our growth percentile,
Still.
we're staying basically the same as where we are. We need to get in the 65 to 85 to start seeing that 722 moving. Otherwise, it's going to continue to stay 722. And so that's why we need to have those difficult conversations sometimes, because just because it's growing doesn't mean it's growing fast enough, and it's not meeting expectations. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 10 minutes. So let's have a 10-minute break till 6:30.
The only one that can't have a break is Dominic.